What's up YouTube fam, 609 Collector. I just boiled and popped off the limbs. Now I'm going to find a seam that's out of the way. So I twist the upper torso to expose this part that's out of the way. I use that sharp punch to push into the seam till I make a hole. And as you see, it's going to penetrate and then crack the figure. This is a small flathead screwdriver I'm going to put in there, and I'm going to use this to wedge open the body. Real soft, real gentle. Just get in there and just keep working it until I can part that seam a little bit more. Alright, throughout the video you'll see I'm going to speed things up during certain parts. Like, I cut this video down from about 30 minutes to 13 for your benefit. So just observe what I do and you'll see. I'll explain. So yeah, now that I've got one side of the seam open, I'm going to go into the other and I'm going to part that as well. And what I'm going to do here is open it enough that I can pull out the crotch area of the figure. Okay, now don't force it. If it's not open enough for you to get in there, just keep working it, and you want to take your time. Now this is the crotch portion of the figure, different from a Marvel Legend in that this upper part here, where this disc that goes into the lower torso is, this is one piece connected to the crotch. All that green is one piece. In a Marvel Legend, the part I'm pointing to right now would be separate. It would be a disc that goes into the lower torso, and then it would also go into the crotch, and it's stationary, so it doesn't move. I mean, there's no reason it can't be one piece, but that's how they do it here on the He-Man figures. Now the brown part there, those are the ball sockets that connect the hips. On a Marvel Legend, a lot of people ask me, how do you get those off? You really can't. On this He-Man figure, that was a soft rubber just like the legs, so it was able to pop off. Now we're looking at the lower torso here. I did separate it, I just didn't crack it all the way. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to get in there and I'm going to finish separating this, and it flew into my face. So now that we're going to get into the lower torso, I'm going to show you something that I was surprised by. This black part is not like a ball and socket really. As you see, it's got a peg that goes through the center of it. Now what that does is it holds it in place, but it also restricts the movement. This isn't like a ball and socket where it goes in and it allows it to rotate all the way. That peg is going to restrict motion, so you're only going to be able to turn so much before the resistance stops this figure. Alright, it's not going to have full centrifugal motion. Now inside you see these peg holes. There are 5 of them, and that is how the front and the center go together. That white spot is a broken peg. It happens sometimes. Sometimes you get lucky and don't break any. Sometimes you get unlucky and break them all, but you can see how that slots together. And also you notice that hole, I put it in the top so that it's out of the way, and once the upper torso is back in there, that's something you wouldn't notice. Right now I'm going to put this little green spacer in there. It kind of fell out when I took it apart, but this has a reason, and I have to put it in before I put in the upper torso because otherwise it's kind of a pain in the ass. But this is meant to kind of fill that gap and keep it nice and tight in there so that the upper torso doesn't wobble around. Alright, and it's a nice little touch. Just make sure you don't lose this if you do crack into this figure. Alright, it's going to keep everything nice and secure. Alright, so take a good look at that, and then that's what's in the lower torso, and that's how it's working. Now I'm going to speed this part up because I spent a long time trying to find a gap to work into the upper torso, and I had to clip and chip away at this because it was actually quite a pain in the ass. So I really just got to the juicy bits. I finally did find a way to get in there, and once I did, I was able to work into the upper torso. I skipped all the parts where I tried to pry at the upper part. I messed around with the neck. I kind of like screwed things up in different places. You can see this white part where I'm creating like a stress fracture. You know, that's why it gets white around the skin, because as it stretches a little bit, it does kind of mess up the paint. But you got to be careful. If you're planning to repaint your figure, it's okay. It's not really warping the plastic too much, but even slight stress is going to cause that. Now I'm working behind the shoulders because I'm really just trying to separate this. This upper torso was a pain. Now you can see me going in here. Be careful when you do this, because if you try to separate above the neck, that part is really fragile. Even on a Marvel Legends figure, what you're going to do is you're going to end up warping the neck, and when you put it together, it's not going to be as good as it should be. There you see I broke a little peg piece. It's alright, it happens, so there it is, little peg from the inside. But it's gonna, oh no. That kind of blew apart on me, but it's alright. I was able to find everything, but on the downside, what you're gonna see here is all those little white spots where all those pegs broke off into the other part, which is okay. If you're gonna put it back together, you're just gonna super glue the crap out of that. You put glue everywhere except for where you need motion, like where the shoulders go, and put those back together. Like, I mean, a lot of super glue. So now you see the upper part of that ball part, it's also got a peg going through, so it's not meant to move either. All right, and that's just the inside of the upper torso. Now for your viewing pleasure and entertainment, I'm gonna just reassemble this torso just so you can see how it's gonna go when you put it back together. All right, get your green spacer in there, and then your upper torso can just go right in. It's pretty easy, no real force required. And then you'll put in this lower part. There is a little space in there because of the little skirt that he wears, but you can see that's how it goes, and that's what it looks like. You can pause it if you want, but that's it. Now where I'm pointing at is where you would want to glue. You want to stop at the joints for the shoulders, but essentially if you glue where all the pegs are, you glue around the outside. Do not glue this part if you want motion, but that's basically what you would need to do when you put this figure back together. All right, now this is how the top works. So you see there's a little gap there for this. It gives you the tiniest bit of up and down motion, but essentially that's it. Now we're gonna get into the shoulders. A lot of people ask, can you boil and pop the shoulders? And the answer is no. If you see how big those discs are compared to the shaft, they are not meant to pull out, because the upper torso is a hard plastic. You're not gonna be able to like just yank that out of there. It's so tight. And to make it idiot proof, you notice there are also two different sizes. Look at how just kidding. Look at how tight those shoulders are when they get in there. They're meant to be in there and to rotate and to not wobble at all. But everything is just designed to fit very snugly, and you really can't mess this up unless you put your torso one backwards. But that's what it looks like. If you're gonna like just boil and pop this and not crack it, you're really not gonna be able to do the shoulders. So you'll have to be happy with what shoulders you have. All right, because look at how tight they are. They're not meant to come out of there at all. On a side note, if you have a figure with butterfly joints, like Marvel Legends, a figure like a Wolverine or a Spider-Man where the shoulders can move forward and back on that rotating angle, that's usually a soft rubber, so you'd be able to pop those out of there. In some cases, you can pop that whole shoulder thing out of there, but I wouldn't recommend taking out the butterfly joint unless you're going to crack the figure, because you're not going to be able to get it back in. Now I'm going to show you the snake dance. Just kidding. But what you have here is you have the range of motion. You can only get so much side to side and so much left and right twist just because of the way that black part is designed. It's not like a ball peg that's connected to the top and slots into the bottom where it can rotate round and round. It's only going to move so much. I'm going to put this down, and then I'm going to start working on the most frustrating part of this whole thing, and that is the lower crotch portion. I'm trying and trying and trying. I left this part in because it was a pain and very frustrating, just to show you that I really failed trying to crack it open with the pick. So I'm gonna cheat, bring out the big guns and use this. If you don't have an electric drill, that's fine. You can get little hand drills that you just twist and they'll get in there too. But the drill isn't really to crack the figure. The drill is just to make the hole. Once I have the hole, then I can force the pick in there. Be very careful when you do this, because you do not want to slip and stab yourself. So I'm going to tell you to be careful. My first hole didn't work, so I'm making a second one here, right in the top, and I'm going to try again. Take your time and be patient. Again, be super cautious, because you don't want to stab yourself. Eventually, you will get in there. You just have to wait. Once you have your little hole, I'm just going to use the pry, and I'm going to try and separate it. And I'm going to try and separate it. And I'm going to try to separate it. Eventually, I do get in there. Believe it or not, there's light at the end of the tunnel. All right. So take your time. Work it slowly. Work around. And then eventually, you'll get in. Be patient. Eventually this will open, and once you get it open, you can have a look inside. Now there's about 4 or 5 pegs in here. Those white dots are the pegs that broke. There's one peg that didn't. Again, luck of the draw. There might be ways. I've heard mineral spirits can help weaken glue. I've never tried it, and I don't know what it does to the plastic, but feel free to give it a try. Maybe I will in the future if I can get my hands on some. All right, now the only opening here that I pointed to is that little circular part at the bottom where the hips go through. That section I pointed to is a part you wouldn't want to put glue on. Alright, just because you wouldn't want anything to get stuck. Around the outsides are great, anywhere there's articulation you can't remember where I was pointing at the butt here, but the disc joint, again, when you put it together, you wouldn't want any glue around that outside part either, because you wouldn't want anything to stick your articulation points. Now I'm going to reassemble this in a minute, but what I'm pointing at here is I'm pointing at where the shoulder fits in. You wouldn't want glue there, you wouldn't want glue where the disc turns, you wouldn't want to stop anything from your back and forth motion, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Alright, so I'm going to start putting this together, but real quick I'm going to stop and take a look at the shoulder in a second and show you some of the articulation points there so you can kind of see how it works. The shoulder is a weird part because even before pinless joints you can see that there's articulation, but you can't really look at it and say, how did they do it? I haven't figured it out. I'm sure someone in the comics knows. It's probably molded around that joint right there, but that's just what the shoulder looks like, and that's how it works. Marvel Legends shoulders are very similar. I think even, well, Mezco's are a little bit different. But for your basic shoulder, it's good. For the most part, it hides the articulation point, and it works. But when it comes to going back in the figure, you see it fits in there real snug and tight. So that's what I was talking about as far as glue. You don't want to mess up your articulation points. Your hips, there's really no motion here except on the ball sockets, so you really wouldn't want to get your glue out there. That's why when I pointed to this circle part earlier, I was like, just keep your glue away from that specific point. You know, you wouldn't want to glue around the brown, but all that green you would want to glue, and then all the edges around the figures, just no articulation points, nowhere where you need to turn. You can put glue on your pegs. You're going to use a clamp. Some of the ones you get from Home Depot with the pressure clamps where you squeeze the trigger and they close. I have a bunch of those. Those work very nicely when you're putting a figure back together. But you can see, you know, it snaps together pretty easily. It's great if you have your pegs still in one piece because they help the figure go together. You saw how easily that bottom piece slid in. But you see all these white spots are all broken pegs in the top. So when you put that together, you're essentially going to have to glue that bad boy on, use a lot of pressure and pray. All right. But the other thing you can notice is that this here, that gap, you got to be careful prying the necks. Even if you don't start at the top, if the neck is the last piece to come apart, you can warp it. So I would use a little hot water to try to bend that back into shape right before you glue, and then you can pretty much close that up. All right, but you can see that the seam where I got in there isn't really noticeable, but all these little white spots are pressure marks. All right, when I'm trying to pry in there, you got to be careful because you will stretch your plastic. No matter the color of the plastic, that can happen. Not a big problem if you're repainting, but if you're planning to just kind of like put that figure back together, you got to be careful. All right, but that's pretty much it. Essentially, that's everything that goes into like cracking the figure and seeing what's inside. Mineral spirits are something I said I want to try just to be sure. But yeah, just be careful. You know, if you can get a junk figure to practice with, I say go for it. So please like, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again. I'll see you next time. Later.